So you have to kind of take the real facts and then take this version of her life and try and align them somehow, you know? So on my wall at home, I did big kind of A3 sheets of the different sequences, you know, in the different years, and then put all the sort of scenes of the movie and then all of her real life things that happen in between. So I could imagine, oh, this is, you know, 1801 when this happened, and she was doing all these things while he was away in Egypt. And some of them we filmed that aren't in this version of the movie, but also a lot were just in my head. And that's why you end up wanting to do all of it.
It's an honor and a pleasure to introduce one of the most versatile actresses working today, SAG Award winner, Vanessa Kirby. A lot. Thanks for joining us. I hope everybody doesn't mind, I want to sort of go back to your early career to sort of set the scene a little bit, because you started your career, or, you know, out of the gate with Ibsen, Chekhov, Shakespeare, Arthur Miller, in highly acclaimed performances in the north of England and then in London. So can you tell us a little bit about what training you took from those early theatrical roles, and you know, what you learned playing those roles with a live audience in a theatre?
Firstly, thank you so much, everyone, for coming the week before Christmas. Don't underestimate that. What did I learn from doing theatre early? God, get through stage fright, firstly. Also, Ridley shoots with sometimes 11 cameras. So you walk in and you might do one take of a whole scene. You might only do the whole scene once out loud, because he shoots, you know, from every side. So he always said this, you know, you've got to lean into it a bit like it's theatre. And it's scary because usually, you know, you might spend a morning doing a scene, and if you get one angle wrong and you go, oh, that was awful, and then you come back and then it gets better and then you find something else. But that was very much a theatrical type experience, except that we had no run-throughs or rehearsals. So that was the difference.
I can't believe you had no run-throughs or rehearsals, but we'll get to that. I want to say that it was so wonderful that NT Live showed us so many of their productions. So, you know, people who live here had the opportunity to see you play Stella in A Streetcar with Gillian Anderson and Ben Foster, and that was an absolutely electrifying performance. So before we get to some of your higher status roles, can you tell us about playing Stella in Streetcar?
Yes. I don't think I was conventional casting for that. Maybe because I come across as a bit crazy in parts or something. I had always, the director said to me, I feel like you're more Blanche, but will you come and do Stella? And we did, the NT Live one actually was in London, and we had a run in London, and then we came to New York. And it's so interesting in theatre, isn't it? Because the more you do it, the more it goes in, the better it. I just love it so much because you get to do it so many times, unlike a movie, you know, doing one take. But by the time we were in New York, we really had it. It felt more, I don't know, it just felt, it's such a big epic play. You guys must know it really well, right? God, it's like a 3.5 hour sometimes, and it's so emotional, and the big journey. And but something that really helped me was that character taught me so much, actually, because traditionally she has this reputation of being quite a doormat, and I really don't like when women are written like that. And I don't believe it either, because she's married to Stanley Kowalski, who's one of the most, you know, virile, masculine, alpha men. And I just thought, why would he stay with Stella if she was just really weak? I don't want her to be weak. And I realized that if she's sisters with Blanche, sorry, I'm going to do a whole hour on Streetcar, but if she's sisters with Blanche, then they come from the same family, and they have the same fears. And in a way, Stella's, I found the answer, the key to playing her. If anyone ever plays her, or you guys ever do it, just please like use this, because it really helped me with the playing of her, was that she has as much of a fear of her own mental instability as Blanche does. And therefore she's in denial. Like, she doesn't want to remember she doesn't want to look back and think about her family or Belle Reve, have the house or the ancestors like Blanche. You know, she's just chosen a different path, which was kind of disassociation rather than Blanche, who's kind of gone into addiction. But she's in a different form of addiction with her husband. So that was useful.
Relationships are fascinating, aren't they? So just this one particularly, but also, you know, just getting to the preparation of playing higher status women. Obviously, you played the King of England and a Queen of England in another National Theatre production, Christopher Marlowe, and then, of course, widely acclaimed and highly rewarded, I hope, playing Princess Margaret in The Crown, which must have made her so proud. If she could see you play Princess Margaret, she must have been overjoyed. She would have been overjoyed. So what do you take from you know, playing stellar and higher status women into the role of Josephine?
Yes, I did think about Princess Margaret a lot, actually. I always miss her because she just was so fun. I mean, she just has... Whenever anyone's nice to me about her, I always say, but it's her, it wasn't me. It's not really, I'm nowhere near as cool as she is. But it was useful in a way, just because I remember Peter Morgan on The Crown saying to all of us, before any of you play any scene, remember that imagine you have a stone in your shoe. Nothing should be easy just because you have this life where we look on it and think, oh, it's really privileged. They live in palaces. They've got the title of princess, but it shouldn't be easy, and every scene should be hard because it's about an emotional family that's, you know, struggling. And I thought the same for this, actually. And Josephine has such an interesting, I wish there was 10-hour series on her. I really hope someone makes one because, my God, even if you just read her Wikipedia page, it's so fascinating. She's so fascinating. And she lived 6 different lifetimes in one. She came from a tiny Caribbean. I know, actually, I'm going to give you the Wikipedia page. I keep chewing people's ear off about her.
We'll come to that because it is, I mean, such a rich background that you had to draw from when you created this character. But I can't get to this, I think, without mentioning Pieces of a Woman, because I think that's 20 minutes of cinema, the opening of that film, that no one who has ever seen it will ever forget. And you just took the audience on an experience with you that made it unforgettable. And I wonder, with some hindsight, what valuable lessons you learned from the whole experience of making that film.
Yeah, it changed me forever, actually. And just as you said, audience, I remembered I saw it only once in a cinema in Venice Festival when it sort of premiered there. And
you won the Best Actress award.
It was during COVID though, so it was just me and my agent. Yeah, it was the height of COVID, and so everyone in the cinema had to be 4 seats apart, and everybody was masked, and it was very, you know, I never got to sit with you guys and do one of these and talk about it. So it was a very singular, quite isolated experience. But it didn't matter because the movie just meant so much to me. And it felt like one of those films when I'd met many women who had lost babies at different stages. And the minute you sit with one and you hear their story and you hear the level of grief and how hard it would be to lose a baby just after birth like that, or before, or a child, the movie was always about them. It was never about us, you know? And some films don't have that, like, it was their story. So the whole thing had a meaning to it that was just made every day about them, not yourself. And that's always nice as an actor, I think, when it's not about you so much. It's easier. And getting to do it, you know, we did 6 takes of the birth scene on 2 days. That was the 4th take of the first day. And the first one was 45 minutes. And even Ben, who's the DOP and holding the camera, he had to hold it for 45 minutes on a gimbal, and follow us and make sure he got everything. And because of that, everybody was in this. I even remember, the boom operator his hand was shaking halfway in the corner of my eye, and the prosthetics guys had the baby's head in the cupboard and had to run in while Shia ran out there. There's so much, but it was such a team thing, and it was like theatre because I don't think I could have ever acted that if there had been breaks, you know, if we'd gone out for lunch and come back and you feel a bit full, but sick, and then you have to pretend you're in the bath and having a baby, and it just doesn't ever feel really true. So it was so nice to feel like that. Plus, I had the absolute honor of watching a real woman give birth who allowed me to watch her. So I saw this incredibly sacred thing because of that film, and I will never be the same because of that. So the whole thing was an absolute privilege.
For us as an audience too, I think. Do you relish the research process? I mean, there is, like you said, such a rich history and so much information available about Josephine. Where with this one, I'm sure it's different with different stories, but with this one, what materials did you begin with? Where did you begin?
Well, I came on quite late to it, so I was so scared I'd be the one that knew the least. So I almost told myself I have to know the most. So it was just before Christmas, and I had lots of Christmas plans. I was meant to go on holiday with my friends. And you guys know, as an actor, you always miss holidays and stuff. And I had to cancel it. And I remember on Christmas Day, actually, my cousin's coming over, my little nephew trying to play with me. And I just had a Josephine book, and I was like, so sorry, I'm busy with Josephine. And so I read every book I possibly could. It was easier on The Crown because there was a little bit of grainy footage. And she has this amazing Desert Island Discs radio program she did. So I could hear her, and I could hear her favorite music. And there was lots of first-hand accounts of people I could meet. But with Josephine, obviously, not at all. And so I read every book I could. And it was weirdly, she eluded me so much because every single book had a completely different version of her. Every time I read a book and I was like, okay, so she was this. And I go, great, phew, I finally got her a week before filming. And then I read another one, and it was just the opposite. Everything was so contradictory. So there would be her lady in waiting who hated Napoleon, really resented him. So was really mean about him, but really deified her and made her into some kind of saint. And that wasn't that helpful because it was one version. And so then I started to realize by about the 10th book that maybe this was because this woman had to survive in all these different forms. Like she was, you don't see it in the movie. We did shoot some bits of her life before, but she was imprisoned. She came over from a Caribbean island on her own, determined to make it to Paris. Had never been in Parisian French society ever. She was like a little scruffy little girl from a tiny island, and she married this aristocrat who never let her out the house, had 2 children. And then they were imprisoned and he got beheaded. And she was 5 days later, she was due to be beheaded herself. And she saw her husband die. And they were released just before because of Robespierre and all that. I'm not going to go into that history, but, and so she was a survivor. She'd met death in a really brutal, very confronting way. And so had this kind of resilience, I think, and Anne then became, the height of these parties and fashion revolution, and had many, many affairs with lots of different men, and was very promiscuous and sensual, and lost all her teeth. I actually wore a teeth thing, and you don't really see her because she doesn't smile too much because she didn't have any teeth. But anyway, it taught me that this woman was someone who had the ability to be mercurial and to shapeshift, and it was just really hard and weird as an actor because there wasn't one version where you could go, oh, okay, Margaret stubs out cigarettes in people's food and doesn't care, and just is very, whereas she was elusive. I couldn't just define her by one thing. So I realized, I think she has so much going on inside, but she has an amazing ability to kind of to keep it inside and not betray herself too much so that she can manage what she had to manage.
And I think probably that's, where she has the power to sort of explore this dynamic and this relationship with him as we understand it in this iteration of the story. I'm wondering, did you look at any of their letters? Because, a lot of the narration is the letters between them, and lots of his exist. I think hers do too. And I'm just wondering if you were able to discern anything from the letters. I just remember from being a kid that there was this famous story. I mean, it's such an epic love story about how he would write to her and ask her not to bathe before he was coming home from war. And when I watched you, I was thinking about the smell, the roses at Malmaison and the luxury, the perfume and him not wanting her to bathe, and this just like animal instinct that we can get to later as well. I just wondered if, anyway, all of that to say, did you read the letters?
Yeah, we all read the letters because they were the key. They were the most direct things from them. A lot of Josephine's were destroyed, as it's in the film. So it was really sad because there's only a few compared to Napoleon's. But I mean, it was the biggest insight into both of them because you have this military commander who must have been, you know, so intellectual and such a strategist, so brain orientated. And he was out on the battlefield and then rushing home into his tent to write these really, I mean, look at any of them up on Google. They're almost ridiculous. And the thing is, she didn't reply to them for a long time. She was having an affair with a 23-year-old. She was going, you know, so there weren't any replies, which told you a lot. And then when he found out she was having an affair and he reacted the way he did, and he clamped down and he said, either you're, you know, you commit to this life or not. And he was so on the up, you know, and she was really scared for her life and her survival. And she was at his knees begging him to take her back. And then she did end up writing a lot to him. And then the power dynamic completely changed. And then he had a lot of affairs after that and it was never healed. It was a very tempestuous, very painful relationship.
So you've read the letters, you've read 10 books, you understand this rich history that you're coming to set with. Is there pressure? You said you filmed some more stuff, like the first time we see you in that beautiful Kate coming out of prison. Is there pressure when you understand that this is the first time you're going to be seen on screen in an epic tale like this, to put all of that history into that first scene? And how do you manage that?
Oh, it's hell all the time because you keep thinking in this moment, this, and then you go, oh no, but she did this and then she thought this, and actually what about this, and how have I got this in, and how do I communicate this, even though this person isn't demonstrative, you know, she wasn't. I think the reason for me it made the most psychological sense that he was so infatuated with her because there was something. He could conquer all the battlefields and all the land from everywhere else he wanted, but he couldn't quite get her because there was something unknowable, or there was something, you know, I found it hard because I'm very, you know, overexpressive a lot. And I find it hard to hide anything I'm feeling. So it was a little bit tricky kind of going, okay, but she wouldn't, if she does this, you know, if she screams in his face or whatever, he's going to get rid of her. Or if she, I always wanted to see her on her own actually. But the first scene that's not in the movie, we saw her with her children and then we saw her go into prison, cut her hair off. I kept thinking, because that scene isn't in the film, I kept thinking, everyone's going to think she just liked that haircut. I was like, no, she cut it off in prison because there's a scene where she says, I don't want to, it was known that the hair gets caught in the guillotine if you don't cut it off. And because she was 24 hours away from being guillotined, she cut her hair off. So that's why she has that really terrible cut. It wasn't like fashion.
She was a trendsetter.
Yeah, even though it did set the trend in some ways. But yeah, because they were survivors, and so they were really admired for being survivors, having, you know, a lot of their friends died.
I think it's interesting. I mean, we know that 18th century France was sexually liberated, and you talked about, you know, her history, about her amorous history. And I think that first scene where you speak to Joaquin and you ask him if you need to warn him of your indiscretions and whether or not he's concerned about your history is absolutely masterful, because it's such a position of power for you. And I wonder, you know, when he admits that he's not at all concerned. And I wonder, you know, just did you have so much fun playing with Joaquin before? Because you said you had no rehearsals, no multiple takes. So this is just what you had imagined, or how did it change in the performance?
It definitely makes you doubt it more somehow, though, because that scene we did 2 takes of. And I often thought about Princess Margaret, and I thought, God, she would have done that scene so differently. She'd have been such a little hussy, you know. And she would have been too much, actually, I think. But with Josephine, I didn't want her to lose her dignity ever, you know, and I didn't want her to play a scene like that and be too... I wanted her to be doing it for survival, not because she thought she was sexy. You know what I mean? I just didn't really buy it. I couldn't really think of... I didn't want to play into, what's the word, the movie-ish quality, the Basic Instinct thing. You know, not that she did it amazingly, but I didn't want to... Yeah, I just didn't want to do any tropes for her somehow of the association with that. And so we only had 2 takes of it, and I just wanted to play it as I felt that she was, which was kind of mixed messaging, you know, and also the reality of, you don't see it in this version, but there is a scene that we filmed where she forces her, so someone says to her, you know, to not be, the only way of avoiding execution is to get pregnant. So you have to sleep with people in this prison. And so she did. They went and slept with anyone they could to try and get pregnant every day. And so there was a scene we filmed where you see her go to do this, and that's why that scene, what she's saying is, I've had to do this, even though she was a sensual kind of person. She was like, I've had to do this, and are you okay with the fact that I've done this a lot? And it all linked to me because they used this, they used acid as a contraception, really painful. And this was after the you know, where they in the victims' balls and things, and she was actually sleeping with Baras, who's Tahar Rahim's. There's also a scene that's not in the movie of him and I. It's like I just met him that morning. And that then meant that she couldn't have a baby. Her womb was damaged from it. And I thought, God, how painful as a woman to have this empire on your shoulders and your ability to procreate. And you've got somebody that now you're attached to and you've been with, you know, your womb won't do it. And I felt so sorry for her. But it all kind of linked to that, because I didn't want her to ever feel like she was, it was a currency that didn't have dignity around for her.
It is one of our greatest, most epic love stories, this enduring love story that he was head over heels in love with her. And, you know, I think, you know, you talk about currency, which is interesting because he obviously offered her financial stability. And I just have to ask, because there are so many intimate scenes. I mean, were you just, and he's literally an animal, like snorting as he makes his way to you under the table, and that is discernibly his foreplay. Were you just cracking up? I mean, were you and Joaquin just having the best, most fun time with it?
I wouldn't say the most fun I've ever had, but yeah, I mean, God, because we had to do those strange things, and I think, you know, they wanted to represent that this person who was so competent on the battlefield was so thoroughly incompetent. And that was true. And she had this very deep affair with this 23-year-old who she couldn't let go of. And this is why I think there should be a series about her or something, because her and the 23-year-old Hippolyte, he had this great scene as well. But again, the movie was like 6 hours. You just can't. It's like, it's already long enough. But they set up an arms dealer trade company, and they made a lot of money on the side from this. And this was, meanwhile, you know, she was at home with him having this really, you know, she was so in love with this boy. And Napoleon was so, always felt, I mean, people always said he had a small man syndrome, and he was very short in real life. He had, when the British, this could have been, the historian always said this could have been a fabrication, but when the British found his body after he died, they were shocked at how small his ribs were. And so he had this, I mean, in terms of, I could never quite, I will never, because I didn't have to be him, but I could never get inside the psyche of somebody wanting to go. Don't you guys think when you watch them go to war, and then they just shake hands after and go, well done, you did really well there. It's like battleships or something. It's like play Minecraft, like make it up. Like it's so weird. And I could never get inside that psyche, but I think that's why they wanted to represent him as sexually. But I never wanted her to seem like, I don't know, in those scenes, I never thought she should enjoy them really.
Were you improvising? I was struck, at one point where you're like, all right then, come on. It just seemed so real. Were you... No insights.
That was an improv, but he looked so stupid in his hat standing there that I just said it. I was like, what are you doing with that leg? Yeah, that was improvised. I didn't know Joaquin was going to do that. And luckily we really got on. Otherwise it would have been quite hard, I think.
So I want to talk about, you talked about it a little bit before this, after Egypt, he finds out about this affair and he's absolutely furious, and he comes back and there's this famous sort of reconciliation, which I thought was portrayed beautifully, like as if it's one long night of a tortured soul. And what's so fascinating about those scenes that make up that evening, just the power play where he starts humiliating her, and then the roles are completely reversed. Can you talk about how long it took to film that, and how, I can't believe that must have been several takes.
It was all one morning, those 3 scenes. They just blacked out the windows for the nighttime bit in between. It was funny. I remember that, I don't actually remember this, but I think because Ridley moves so fast and you might have 6 or 7 big scenes in one day, you don't have time because you have to have different wigs and different costumes and everything takes ages. So you're rushing. So it was all a bit of a blur for me. But the scene when the nighttime scene when we're on the sofa, the editor reminded me that we did a couple of takes that were 9 minutes long. And I said, I don't remember that. What did we do? And she went, oh, everything. I think I might have slapped him back actually at one point. I think I slapped him. I think we kissed. I screamed at him, and it was such a nice release because she's been keeping it all in. But you can't have you couldn't have a 9-minute take of that. It would have probably been just too much.
It's a fascinating scene, and it, you mentioned Ridley. How would you describe his directorial style? Did he leave you both alone to play? Was he giving you lots of notes? How was it to work with him?
Yeah, it's a really specific, unique way. And in a way, I think the reason he didn't want to rehearse because he wants you to just get on there and not know. So when Joaquin crawled under the table, I didn't know he was going to do it, which is why I laughed. And now as an acting choice, I probably wouldn't have chosen to laugh because of the conversation that they're having, but because it was so surprising. I couldn't help it, And so those sorts of things, I know he told Ridley and they discussed really, really briefly, but then the cameras were on and suddenly we did it and we did 2 takes and then that was that. So I was like, okay, cool. Well, Josephine's laughing in this one. Yeah, it was I think Ridley likes the improvisational quality that comes with that. I think he's got into a real, having done so many films now, he knows where he wants the camera. The one thing I did ask for was lots of his storyboards, because he storyboards everything, even on the film he's doing the next, he's storyboarding the next movie in between takes. I know he's doing Gladiator 2 on Napoleon. I was like, but Ridley, what about right now? Oh, he's so prolific. So it was useful to have those storyboards because I could kind of see the location and see where the camera angles might be. Because you're kind of used, as an actor to knowing where the camera is and knowing, oh God, if it's a real tight, I better not do too much. I better try and not do too much. But you don't even know that because there's 11 on you. So you have to just kind of do something.
That's stunning because the dissolution of the marriage, it's such a magical scene and so much of it is close up and tears streaming. I'm just like, is this a magical skill of yours? It's just so heartbreaking because of the story that he's obviously so in love with her, but he's fulfilling some sort of political ambition to have an heir. And you don't know where the camera is. Does that come easily to you to just do the job without being aware of where the camera is?
I think, God, I always feel aware of the machines in the room, you know, because I started on stage for so long, it took quite a long time to transition to having technical aspect to working. In that divorce scene, I think I was just so gutted for her. I felt just so sorry for her. So in a way, it wasn't, you know, sometimes you can think, oh God, the character's meant to cry here, and how do I think of something sad? But that I didn't even really think I was going to or not. It was just, I just felt so rubbish for her, because I just thought, oh my goodness, you've just dedicated everything. And this is what's happening, a kind of public divorce as well, in front of everybody. You know, there's also so many extras. There was 200 extras around. So I felt it wasn't a wedding, it was a divorce ceremony. I mean, just anyone having to do that would be terrible, let alone if you're this empress of this empire and you haven't been able to give, you know, birth or have a child. So unfortunately, you've got to go. I mean, I just thought it was really rubbish for her, and I really felt for her.
And his behavior is so silly. That must have been surprising. So when you first receive David Scarpa's script and you're going through the script, are you trying to carve out all of those moments in each scene? Are you immediately putting your, you know, first read or second or third or 12th? Are you putting yourself in Josephine's shoes and reading everything from her point of view and carving out those beats for yourself as an actress?
I think it's a funny one, because it's a synthesis of, and I remembered it because I'd done the process on The Crown with someone real. I was really excited to do another one. So you have to kind of take the real facts and then take this version of her life and try and align them somehow, you know? So on my wall at home, I did big kind of A3 sheets of the different sequences, you know, in the different years, and then put all the sort of scenes of the movie and then all of her real life things that happen in between. So I could imagine, oh, this is, you know, 1801 when this happened, and she was doing all these things while he was away in Egypt. And some of them we filmed that aren't in this version of the movie, but also a lot were just in my head. And that's why you end up wanting to do all of it, because God, there's just so many, you know, there's a big assassination plot where she nearly died because they got blown up on the way to the opera. And there's another thing where she came to visit the front lines and she fell and broke both her hips, so her pelvis was shattered, and she spent months. I mean, honestly, it's just, you can't, but if someone wrote it as a fictional thing, you'd be like, that's just one too many things. I mean, you know, it was just really amazing. So I just tried to map that all out, and then in the moments that she had, just try and filter some of them through, i.e. sort of at the beginning, even though you don't see her from the prison, I wanted her to have like a survivor's resilience, but also rage somehow inside, you know, just knowing what she's just experienced and seeing her friends, you know, hundreds of them, watch them from her prison cell, thinking you're about to die, so you cut your hair, but watching their heads be cut off. I mean, I can't imagine that kind of coming close with that. I just thought that's something inside, as well as I've come from this Caribbean island where the reason I haven't got teeth is because she sucked on sugarcane her whole childhood. So all her teeth were rotten. So that's why we did actually do one take where in the scene where they sit in the cafe and they're saying sort of hello to each other for the first time. I was laughing. He was making me laugh because he was being strange. And then my teeth came out and he went, oh, are you shy about your teeth? And she, you know, I looked away. I was like, oh, I really didn't want anyone to see them. And he's like, it's okay. You can show your teeth to me. Anyway, maybe it was too sentimental for the film, but we filmed it, you know, and those little things that you never see in the movie, but you do all this, you know, you read all these books and you want to be true to her life. And I went to visit her tomb. And so interesting. If you guys go to Paris, go and see this. You know, Napoleon's tomb is like 5 stories high, and then hers is an hour and a half outside of Paris in the far corner of some little church. And I just went and spent some time with it because I thought, you know, that's where she is right now. And I just thought, oh, I just really want to do justice because I don't, you know, you had such an amazing life, and you've been the kind of counterpart to this huge male personality in history. And there's been a book every week written about Napoleon, and there's been so few compared about her. So I kind of wanted to I wanted to at least feel her experience. And I'm glad that I did, because I had so much respect, because I would have been 3 days and I wouldn't have lasted it. I'd been booted out to live on somewhere, I'd been exiled somewhere.
But you did a brilliant job. We see all of those colours, you know, even though it's just one shot leaving prison, it's like we understand the reign of terror. We see the survivor. It's very impressive. Question from the audience from Annie. We might have covered something similar, but Annie is asking if you can share your preparation, maybe not for this project necessarily, but when there are multiple takes, and especially when there's an emotional scene, like when your character must bawl or hit rock bottom. So, I mean, we did see that here.
Yeah, it's such a tricky one, isn't it? That, because I feel like it's different every time. And also, I remember that I was really nervous because one of our first scenes on The Crown was when the king dies, and both Claire Foy, played Elizabeth, and I had to come into see the body of the king and cry over the body of your father. And I just thought, oh my God, as an actor, how do you do that? How do you do that feels true? And also Claire was about to go in, and I so admired her, and I thought, oh my God, she's going to do. I was like, what would Margaret do? She'd probably be more, you know, from what I was gathering of her, she would have been more emotive and expressive. So I was like, right, I've got to really work myself up here. So I got ready in makeup and my wig, and was in a room upstairs, and downstairs they were filming this little room, and they had this fake body of Jared Harris. And I really worked myself up, and I was ready to go. And it was 8 o'clock. At midday, I still wasn't on. And so I had 4 hours where I was crying, and I was imagining it, and I was just thinking of everything that any grief I'd lived in my life. And by the time it came to my scene after lunch in the end, you know, I was just dry as a bone. I had to rev myself up again and go, oh, here we go, you know. So it's always it's a tricky one, isn't it? I don't have an answer for it other than I don't know what the answer is to it is. Every time's different. I guess really imagining whatever the circumstances, really imagining that it's happening right now, I guess. And I do use playlists. That really helps. That is a tool that definitely helps. Just collate it before, save those songs, and then use them. That does help. And block it out, and don't be shy even before, you know, after they do camera. Nowadays, often even just as they say, just before action, I still have music in if I need to be in a different zone of any kind. And I don't get shy about it. I used to think, but no, now I use it.
That's really useful. Thank you. I just want to talk a little bit about some of the fun things I think you get to play with as an actor. And here are the costumes, Janty Yates. I mean, so illustrative of the story, so much fun, so gorgeous. Can you talk to us about how they made you feel, or how they might have changed something for you, or just those beautiful costumes?
They were amazing, and they helped so much because, again, I learned this on The Crown. When you're playing, it's so hard to imagine yourself living in a royal palace and being a princess and bowing to the queen. I mean, just, it's so far off. But then suddenly when you're working with a costume designer and they are designing all your dresses and showing you pictures, and you actually go through the process with someone like Margaret or Josephine where they did have that process. And I'm not very good at it usually. I don't, you know, I'm not a big dressing up person in my life at all. My friends know that. Really scruffy. But when you play people like them who did have a tailor, a dressmaker on, and every time they would just be able to select fabrics and do that whole thing, I have to care about it because they did. And so it then helps because then you actually live a process by which they did all the time, and they cared and they would select. And actually, again, another fascinating thing about her that's not in the film is that she was a raging shopaholic. And she spent more money I can't remember what the fact is anymore. I have to dig it out, but she spent more money than any monarchy had ever spent ever before. She just was, it was an addiction really. And I imagine it must have been because she didn't feel good inside. So it was a way of, she accumulated stuff and she forgot, after she bought it, she forgot where it was or what it was. It was just like boxes of stuff. So with Janty, I would go, you know, she'd bring different options. They're all kind of, you know, I don't know what you call those fake jewels. Someone was so gutted because I said, oh, sometimes the jewels were plastic on the crown, and someone was really gutted. But yeah, and you would just go, okay, no, these earrings with this. Can I wear this? Should we do this? Should we, you know, and the dresses were really constricted, you know, corseted and, but always amazing. I mean, Janty did it all really. She just would go, oh, I think she needs to wear gold here. And I think and you make little choices, like, for example, not that anyone would ever notice, but the, when the scene when, Napoleon finds out that he's got someone else pregnant, we decided she should wear like a blood red dress because she's trying to feel as fertile as she possibly can, you know, and like little things like that you have fun with, not that anyone would feel it or notice, but we enjoyed doing things like that all the time, all the way through.
I think they are palpable. We do notice, and it's like the hair too. When you talked about, you know, coming out of prison, and then he makes you say to him, you know, my hair is set like, you know, as you like it, and then the updo, you know, all of those things are very noticeable. I think about Josephine and the stationery she sends to him, you know, the shopaholic. Thank you so much for sharing all of these insights with us this evening. It was a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
So nice. Thank you for being here.